I don't know why I agreed to go there. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the silence in my head that begged to be filled with something darker. But the truth is, when I first heard about the cabin in the Appalachian woods, the one they called the doll cabin, I couldn't stop thinking about it. People said no one should go near it, that strange lights burned in the windows at night and whispers carried through the trees. I told myself it was just a story. I packed a flashlight, a camera, and drove deep into the mountains. The further I went, the quieter the world became. No birds, no insects. Even the crunch of my boots against the dirt trail felt too loud, like the forest itself was holding its breath. And then I saw it. A crooked little house made of rotting logs, crouching in the shadows of the trees. The roof sagged, the wood was almost black from rot, but the worst part were the windows. Even before I stepped closer, I felt eyes staring out at me. I lifted my flashlight, and for a moment the glass reflected the beam, but just beyond it, pale faces, perfectly round, smooth, too still. Dolls. At least, that's what I thought they were. The front yard was overgrown, but there was a wooden sign hammered into the dirt, tilted at an angle. The letters carved into it had been worn down by time, but I could still read them. Doll cabin. I told myself it had to be some kind of joke, maybe a roadside attraction, abandoned years ago. But the closer I got, the colder the air became, until it felt like the temperature dropped 10 degrees in seconds. My breath came out in a thin fog. I reached the porch, and the boards creaked under my weight. The smell hit me then, damp earth, mildew, and something sour like spoiled meat. I gagged, but forced myself to step closer to the door. It was half open. From inside came a faint sound. Not wind, not the shifting of wood, a soft clicking noise, irregular, like something tapping porcelain against glass. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but my legs carried me forward. I pushed the door open, and the hinges screamed like a wounded animal. The inside was worse. Shelves lined the walls, covered in dust, and every single one was filled with dolls. Their glass eyes reflected the light, dozens of tiny stares cutting into me. Some were cracked, some missing limbs, others painted with smiles that had faded into grotesque smudges. I whispered to myself that it was just an old collection, nothing more. But then, one of them moved. Not much, just a tilt of the head. But I swear to you, it turned to look at me. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone in that cabin. I should have left the moment I saw it move. Any sane person would have run back into the woods without looking back. But instead, I stayed. My chest was heavy, my heartbeat thundered in my ears, yet I couldn't bring myself to walk away. Something about that place, about those eyes watching me, it held me like invisible hands pressing against my shoulders. The clicking sound came again, louder this time. Not one, but many, a sharp, staccato rhythm echoing across the room, as if dozens of porcelain fingers tapped against glass. I swept my flashlight across the shelves. Each time the beam landed on a doll, it seemed to be in a different position. Their glassy stares followed me, their cracked mouths frozen mid-smile. The air grew colder still. My skin prickled, my lips trembled as if the room itself was draining the heat out of me. And then I heard it, whispers, thin, fragile, almost childlike, but layered, a chorus of tiny voices weaving through the cabin, rising and falling like a lullaby sung out of tune. My throat dried. "Who's there?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The voices hushed. The clicking stopped. The silence that followed was so dense, I could hear the pounding of my pulse in my ears. I turned toward the door, my only escape. That's when I saw it. One of the dolls was no longer on the shelf. It was standing in the doorway. I froze. My beam of light trembled in my hand. It was small, no taller than a child, with porcelain skin cracked like spiderwebs. Its eyes were mismatched, one bright blue, the other a hollow pit of darkness. And in its tiny hands, it held something sharp, rusted metal, a fragment of a broken scissor blade. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a loose floorboard. The sound made others stir. Shelves rattled, heads turned in unison, dozens of dolls shifting all at once, their limbs creaking like old wood. I backed into the center of the room, surrounded. The whispers started again, louder, faster, until they were a shrill chant in a language I didn't recognize. I covered my ears, but the sound drilled straight into my skull. Then, the lights in the cabin flickered on, not from my flashlight. The oil lamps hanging from the walls sputtered to life, one after another, bathing the room in a sickly yellow glow. And in that moment, I realized the shelves weren't just lined with dolls. They were lined with photographs. Old, faded pictures of people, families, children, men and women, all standing in front of the same cabin, the same porch. And in every photograph, the people were holding dolls. I looked closer. My stomach dropped. The faces of the dolls in the photos matched the ones on the shelves. Every single one. The whispers stopped. Silence again. I turned slowly, and the doll in the doorway had moved closer, its cracked lips parted. And in a child's voice, faint but sharp, it said, "You shouldn't have come here." I don't remember dropping the flashlight, but I must have, because the beam rolled across the floor and stopped against a cracked porcelain foot. The cabin swam in the sickly light of the lamps, and I was surrounded, shelves of dolls watching, the one in the doorway creeping closer, its tiny blade glinting in its hand. My instincts finally screamed louder than my fear. I bolted for the door, shoving past it. The doll's porcelain arm scraped my leg, sharp enough to cut through denim, but I didn't stop. I ran into the night, through the trees, branches whipping my face, lungs burning. But the sound followed me, not footsteps, not leaves crunching. That same clicking noise, porcelain tapping porcelain. Dozens of them, behind me, around me, above me. The forest was alive with it. I thought if I could just reach the trail, I'd make it out. I thought wrong. The trees thinned, and there it was again, the cabin. My blood turned to ice. I had run in circles. Somehow, no matter which direction I took, I was being pulled back. The front door gaped open like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. And standing there, framed in the doorway, was not a doll, but something else. It was taller, its body stitched together from parts of many dolls. Arms too long, heads jutting out at odd angles, their eyes blinking in unnatural rhythms. In its chest, like a grotesque heart, rested the hollow-eyed doll that had spoken to me. It raised one arm, and the whispers started again. This time, they weren't outside. They were in my head. Voices digging under my skin, filling me with thoughts that weren't mine. "Stay with us. You belong here now." I stumbled backward, clutching my ears, screaming for it to stop. But the forest bent around me, shadows twisting into thin figures with doll faces stretched tight over them. Every tree seemed to bleed porcelain heads, hanging like rotten fruit. I don't remember falling, but I hit the ground hard. My vision blurred, the world spinning. When I forced myself up, I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was back inside the cabin. The shelves loomed around me, the photographs staring down. And in the corner, an empty space, a single gap on the shelf, waiting. I understood then. The whispers weren't just voices. They were calling me to fill that space. I backed away, shaking my head, begging under my breath, when cold, tiny hands gripped my ankles. Another pair grabbed my wrists. Dolls climbing onto me, their porcelain faces pressed against my skin, their glass eyes inches from mine. I thrashed, kicked, screamed. The largest one leaned down, its stitched face breaking into a dozen cracked smiles. And just before the darkness swallowed me, I heard the words again, whispered as if from inside my skull, "Now you're ours." And that's why I can't sleep anymore. Why I don't close my eyes without seeing that cabin waiting for me. Because somewhere in those Appalachian woods, there's a shelf with my name on it.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.